Right, here we have the top 8 decks of the Penny Dreadful 500 of Season 33. Winner is Boros Heroic, brainchild of Dat Rubino and
Chicken in the Brain.
Chicken in the Brain. Basically has the sort of 8 guys that you want to put auras on, teeny bit of protection in the form of Benevolent Bodyguard, and a bunch of auras, mostly red auras, that make your thing you want to target bigger. Pretty straightforward.
Should also be noted, there's Lurrus in this deck. Absolutely great.
Yeah, and sideboard Price of Progress for the cheeky free wins. Yeah, so you just mulligan to one of your 12 things to put auras on, put a bunch of auras on it, see if you've won or not. At the point at which it dies, try and make another one. If that fails, put Lurrus in hand and try and get it back that way. Pretty straightforward plan. 20 lands, tops out at 2, obviously, for Lurrus. And draws a ton of cards. Kind of doesn't care so much about things like Condemn, as some aggro decks might, because you presumably stack your creature high with auras and draw a bunch of cards before it gets condemned, giving you the ability to go again. Loss was to blue-white control in round 2.
Ruined Halo.
Yeah, lost to blue-white control in round 2. Otherwise, around the tables, quite a few game losses, but yeah, pretty great showing for this like late game innovation deck. Second place was Clerics, which is showing up as 5 color because Gatherling doesn't understand that Progenitus is not really a card that you cast in this deck. So just a whole mess of 31 Clerics and a Progenitus, which you can fetch with Shadowrite Priest's ability. Shadowrite Priest, I think, would probably be in the deck anyway. This is just a 2/2 Lord for your other Clerics. Most of these have great abilities, some more or less relevant in different matchups. 2 Weathered Wayfire in the main is kind of interesting. I guess if you're trying to get to 5 mana to activate your Shadowrite Priest, and you have manlands in the form of Cave of the Frost Dragon and Shambling Vent, it makes some amount of sense, and it is a Cleric, so it triggers Taborax when it dies.
Also, to some extent, you just want 1 mana creatures in your deck because you want the full aura chain. So once you put the Benevolent Bodyguards, then...
Yeah, so if you're topping out at this very powerful, kind of weird removal-friendly Lord, then yeah, just having a bunch of, if they wrath you, everything except aura comes back. You get a 1 or 2 or 3. You don't really care that you got wrath.
You want 1 mana clerics. You want 1 mana clerics that you can get something back when your 2-drop dies.
Mm-hmm.
And after Benevolent Bodyguard, it appears Weathered Wayfarer is the best.
Yeah, and there's 1 Cathedral Sanctifier in the main, and I think another in the side. They have an attrition, which just allows you to take over against creature decks. A lot of your things triggers on dies, so Aura and Liliana, I guess that's probably it. They're kind of pretty happy for you to be sacking your creatures. You do have to sack real creatures, you don't really have any tokens. And Dam is a 2 mana removal spell that bails you out as a board sweeper. Some sideboard cards, Canonist for stormy things. We saw that actually to good effect in game 2 of the final against the Auras deck, just limiting to 1 aura a turn. Metropolis Reformer card I've never seen before, but kind of good against small creature aggro. Remorseful Cleric for graveyard decks, presumably. Thalia for control or spells. Vindicate handles anything. Another Cathedral Sanctifier for red deck wins, and just instant speed removal spell for something like Greasefang, perhaps. Pretty much dark horse. I think Akamatsu is about the only person who's played this deck this season, but it has been played before in Penny.
Yeah.
Lost to Goblins in round 2.
Interesting that there's no Path to Exile in this list.
Yeah, 0 path.
Almost.
Preferring Fateful Absence, preferring Vindicate. So, yeah. Hi. Okay, then the losing semi-finalists were Hogak Roots. This beat me in the quarterfinal. Some close games. So there's a 6-3 record, 2 losses to the Clerics. and Boros Glimpse in the Swiss, and then losing the semi to Resto Kiki. It's basically just a bunch of ways to enable Dread Return on Iona or casting a Hogak. And then there's also Insidious Roots, I guess, is probably plan C, or maybe it's higher up than that. Some of these guys are pretty terrible.
Good off of Hogak or whatever, because Hogak gives you 2 tokens. One from the Dread Delve, one from the Hogak cast.
Yeah, we have Grave Troll to Dredge, which also makes a token. We have Narcomoebas coming out of the grave, which also makes a token. So a lot of synergy here. Maybe gives you the ability to go wide, or suddenly have a bunch of mana for like hard casting Iona or something. 3 Dread Returns. We're pretty in on, mill ourselves with these mill cards. Coming with the Gods doing a lot of work. Looking for the enchantment or a creature. Pretty sweet. I feel like we'd pretty much concluded this deck was not good early season. A lot of people tried it. Didn't do great. I don't know if this build is wildly different. I don't think many people had 3 Dread Return. I think a lot of people went down low or to 0 Narcomoeba. So maybe it was just a few cards off. Maybe it got good matchups. Hard to say. But yeah, lots of powerful plays. I mean, Iona is obviously a pretty nutty thing to have in play. Hogak, hard to kill without exiling removal. Just comes back. And then a bunch of enablers. And I died in one of my games to just a bunch of hard cast Golgari Drave Trolls. I think I passed to exiled 3 of them before they got me.
Hey. That game was something. I am shocked by how good Hogak was.
Yeah. So the other losing semi-finalist was Boros Humans. This is a Lurrus deck. It has no main deck price to progress, which is different to most of the builds. A little bit more, I don't know, Lightning Helix and Path to Exile.
Has a lot of main deck removal spells.
2 Requisition Raid in the main, 2 Kellen for some value.
I believe the Requisition, a lot of this list is very similar to one that's been played a whole lot, almost all season. The price of progresses appear to have been switched with the Path to Exiles in the sideboard. But other than that, this list is pretty close to one that people like Copetus
You're always playing for Champion, for Thalia's Lieutenant, some number of Thalia, some other 1-drops for Luminarch. I think the Heartflame Duelist is pretty much always a 4 of. Some Lightning Helix somewhere in 75, some Path to Exile somewhere in 75. 2 Requisition Raid in the main is interesting. Kind of like an Anthem, I don't know.
It's kind of like an Anthem that prevents... It's very good if your opponent plays like Ruined Halo or Detention Sphere.
Yeah.
You get your Anthem just happens to remove artifacts.
Yeah, pretty defensible. I mean, one of the things that's nice about an Anthem in Winnie is it carries on so that your manlands or your next rubbish 1/1 that you play is actually a real threat, and that doesn't apply here, but of course it has the option value of destroying artifacts and enchantments, so probably pretty good. There are no manlands, notably, not even room for one Cave of the Frost Dragon, but that's our other losing semi-finalist.
The Cave of the Frost Dragon isn't there because there's Battlefield or Clifftop Retreats. You don't want to lower your typed land count more.
Yeah. These Clifftop Retreats are a little dodgy for coming down untapped on turn 2.
Yeah. Already.
Prairie doesn't make turn 1 white. You've got 15 sources of turn 1 white, so you're pretty safe there. But yeah, interesting. But yeah, definitely enabling the Clifftop Retreat. So losing semi-finalists include top of the Swiss, Azorius Aggro Control version 9. I could probably talk about this deck for a very long time, but I'll resist. I won my rounds 2 to 6, and then just lost the last round of the Swiss to Clerics, lost to Hogak Roots in the quarterfinal. But I was having a pretty good run, although I will say I would have lost this round 2 match to Eternal Paradox if I had not top decked a Celestial Purge for his Goblin Bombardment the turn he resolved the 2-2 that combos with it. So,
Forsaken Miner.
yes, that's the guy. So here,
Yeah.
I mean, the key idea of this deck is I wanted to beat Glimpse and I wanted to beat blue-white control. So Boromir is good against Wraths and is the single best card against Glimpse. No More Lies is good against anything except a suspended Glimpse for the very beginning of the game. Power Sink doing some backup to that, and Forbid, if you get to 3 mana, which they can potentially go off before 3 mana, kind of locks them out to some extent, and then really
Path to Exiles into more counter spells. Very
Pa-
good.
Yeah, Path to Exile also counters Etali's Favor or an Appraiser that hits a Favor, so they stay in post-board as well. So you've got a lot of answers to Glimpse. I think I've played it 6 times now, and I think I've won 6 times. Other cards in that matchup are just, Deduce, Novice Inspector that draw towards the things that keep your head against Glimpse, and Stoic Sphinx to kill people. Against Control, you've got Stoic Sphinx, which I heard the Watchwander say on a YouTube video long ago that if they don't have Path, instantly, then it's just a huge problem for Control, so I've tried to play several of those. I also have one Splendor Mare in the main, so sometimes against an aggressive deck, I'll slam a Stoic Sphinx turn 4, hopefully ambushing something, untap and give it lifelink, and then you can kind of do that aggro control thing where you race and win the race. Luminarch Aspirants just for slamming on turn 2 when you're the aggro, just grows your Novice Inspector or itself, becomes a really significant threat. If it's growing a Novice Inspector, then they don't even know which of the 2 things to point the removal at. Pretty good when you're the aggro. I played a Timeless Dragon, I don't really know why. I played it over the 3rd Power Sink, it was fine. I played a Horned Whale just because I felt I didn't quite have enough removal against aggro in the main. Because there were no playable 1-drops apart from Novice Inspector, I tried a million different things. I ended up playing 4 Colonnade, an Irrigated Farmer, and a Prairie Stream as kind of nominal 1-drops, made the mana better, and gave me have 6 man lands to kind of close games against maybe Control or something. Sideboard, lots of answers to aggro. I think I'm probably not favoured in game 1 against aggro. Just don't want to run more than about 4 or 5 removal spells in the main because they're dead against blue-white Control. But post-board, if you're on Aristocrats, I bring in Purges, Condemns, and Settle. If you're on White Weenie, I bring in Wrath, Condemn, and Settle. Not too much for Control, just a Disdainful Stroke and a Spell Pierce. Boombringer Valkyrie, the idea is to end the game against Red Deck Wins, and maybe Aristocrats, I did bring it in there as well. So anyway.
How did the Walkwell fare for you?
I got into a position against Hogak where I just absolutely needed him to attack with Iona, and he did, and I got it off the board and off white. But I still didn't win, unfortunately. But so for that reason alone, I was, extremely glad to have it in that moment. I did aim it at, it allowed me to play around Benevolent Bodyguard a little bit when I had 2 pieces of interaction, stuff like that. I think I went to pass something once, forcing the bodyguard, and then. But I guess, in a sense, any 2 pieces of interaction work there. So maybe.
Did you cast the whale side at all?
I did cast the whale side. I cast it in a way that was really useful at least once, and I cast it in a way where it had to double block a Hogak, which was going to come back anyway, which was much less interesting use of the card. It was fine. I mean, I can't really argue with my results. I misplayed against Clerics because I didn't understand how Aura interacted with the Wrath, and the Hogak games. You saw they were very close. I think they could have gone another way. If you didn't have that Abrupt Decay for Boromir, it probably just shuts him out of the game, and can neither Dread Return for free nor Hogak at all. So yeah, I maybe could have held it, but I think that would have been wrong. Anyway, that was me. I lost in the quarterfinal to Hogak. I did have Purify the Grave 3 or 4 in the side for a long time, and I did cut them on the basis that there were no real graveyard decks. Eternal Paradox.
Of course, you might not have gotten in that position if you didn't have
For
the
sure,
Wraths
for sure,
and
for sure.
Celestial Purges.
For sure, yeah. None of the cards in my sideboard were unused today. They were all used multiple times. Also losing quarterfinalist was Eternal Paradox on Rakdos Aristocrats.
Eternal Paradox has been on a streak with Aristocrats.
Yeah, so he lost the final of the
last
kickoff
season.
and lost the final of the last 500 with essentially this deck, right?
Yeah, and is now back in top 8.
Yeah, despite a round 2 loss to the notorious Baker T99, he did do great. Okay, I'm just going to have to pause here for 1 second while I deal with the door. Hold your horses. Babe, could you get...
Well, time to hijack the stream.
Are they there right now?
Yeah, this
Get on.
Kratz deck is very good because it's
that okay?
essentially the same deck that was top cut last season's 500, except that it gains Forsaken Miner, which adds an extra dimension. Because getting to loop, this is very good.
Yeah.
Hello, we're just coming out right
Normally
now.
This like
Just 1 second.
2/1s that can't block, very bad in the
Thank
aggro
you.
mirror.
I'll
Much
go
less
there.
bad when you have essentially like 5+ pings every turn.
Okay, thank you, babe.
I think this is one of the very best decks in the format. Though, I think only Eternal Paradox has really been doing great with it. Watch.
The Aristocrats, and I think this deck is very good.
Yeah.
You know, the Forsaken Miner plus Bombardment is just crazy against creature decks, or if you've got your opponent down to single digits, and then, you know, playing really quality threats like Dreadhorde Butcher, and then stuff that just like can't die. Vran is
Very
maybe
annoying.
a little weak.
Very annoying to Wrath Bloodsoaked Champions and Dread Wanderers.
Yeah, I don't think I even brought in Wrath against the stake. Maybe I did, but yeah. And Dark Confidant, you know, just a great card. So kind of card quality is really high, but the synergy is also pretty high. It's really interesting that basically everyone has decided that playing 3 or 4 Judith in the main is better than getting Lurrus in the sideboard. I find it hard to believe. But the consensus is strong. I don't even know if anyone's even played this deck with Lurrus.
They have. So the thing with Judith is that Judith essentially functions as a second Goblin Bombardment, and the difference between this deck with Bombardment and this deck without Bombardment is really noticeable. All your like kind of wimpy 2/1s become 3/1s that punch. That's way better at hitting through blockers. You get pings on death.
Yeah, you do get to sit on your 2 rubbishy guys, attack with them. If they die, so what? And then back they come, and Judith kind of beefs up that whole process.
It should be noted, this deck is like barely Aristocrats. Outside of Bombardment, it's kind of just black-red aggro.
Yeah.
Bombardment's the only sack outlet in the entire
True.
deck.
Even though there's like 3 Vran, which reads like a very aristocraty
Yeah,
card.
Vran, as it turns out, is just like a good aggro card. You play your 1-drop and then you play Vran, and you attack with your 1-drop, and
yeah, now the trades are horrible. Even if you're trading with Novice Inspector, well, you're going to get back your 1-drop later because it comes back from the graveyard, and you've got to drain in. And the 4 bat in the main is interesting. That's presumably just a nod to Glimpse and other things that you can't, you know, that would do their thing before you curve out and kill them.
But also very good with Judith, because pumping the power on Deep Cavern Bat is exceedingly strong.
And then sideboard has Thoughtseize at Home in the form of Spectre Shriek, 3 Price of Progress because it's just nuts against some people. Tunnel Ignis as a kind of rubbish hoser for Glimpse.
It's an answer partially to the Hoopsall Lands deck that was popular this season. It's and also the Field of the Dead ramp deck that saw some play.
There's an Art of Infamy which was pretty good against me. Okay.
Surprisingly, I think this is the only Bob deck in top 8.
Looks like it.
Maybe like the only Bob deck in top 16 as well.
Looks like it. So another losing quarterfinalist is a blue-white tempo. This one is a little different to mine. Has more one-drops. I decided Spyglass Siren
It's
was not
much
worth the
more
price being
creature
paid.
heavy. I'd say this deck is kind of less tempo-y and more just like blue-white mid-range.
Yeah, it's I mean, there's a lot of similarities here. So 4, 8, 12, 14,
There's
15,
22
19,
creatures.
23, 26, 27, 28. So 28 non-land cards, the same as my list of 37. So it's only some tweaks. So some more one-drops in the forms of 3 Spyglass Siren and an Isamaru. 1 less Obstructionist, 2 less Boromir in the main. Presumably the rest are in the side they are. So just a little bit less afraid of Glimpse and Wrath than me.
It's playing a lot more creatures. It's playing Flowering and
There's 15 spells here, even if once you discard the whale, and this is more of a spell than a... So it's not...
It's 15 spells, though 2 of them directly only work with creatures.
Only 2 Colonnade, got a castle for Pippin and Isamaru and Boromir. A Mystic Gate, a card that I really wanted to play, but I just felt I had to support turn 1 Novice Inspector, because Inspector into Aspirant is so much better than tap land into Aspirant into Inspector. For obvious reasons. Pretty similar sideboard to mine. I ended up ditching the Flash Freezes because I decided that I already beat Glimpse, and it wasn't good against red deck wins compared to something like Celestial Purge.
There's not really any green decks, really.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Only for red. Yeah. And then no Wraths, just 1 Settle. So a little bit easier to kind of fall down to the nuts aggro draw, perhaps.
So,
but
of course, playing more creatures is better against
having
aggro.
4 more 1-drops, some of which block okay against humans. 1-drops pretty good. So round 4 loss was to Goblins. I felt that match was essentially unlosable, so it's kind of interesting. But of course, I had 5 Wraths after board, and he only had 1. So maybe that made a big difference. So I won both games against Tigrex, and then the loss to the red-white auras, which I think it just makes the big thing, possibly on the play where you can't even counter anything, except for just countering the auras doesn't do anything. So it's really just all about, did you find your path to exile in the first game, and then in the second game.
This deck is also kind of laughably weak to Dust Corona, weirdly.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's noticeable that it's in the first game, the only thing that deals with the creatures that are getting all the auras shoved on them is the path, and the sideboard just offers 1 Settle. So if you're on the play, that's fine. You can counter a Spirit Dancer or whatever. But, do you even want your counter spells on the draw? No, I would say not. At which point you have 5 outs to the entire game.
You have to anyway. Like, maybe your plan is to draw a removal spell and then counter the second creature.
Yeah, so
It's
definitely tough. And there's no life gain here at all. So, there is the Horned Lockwell. The Lagoon Breach would maybe partially deal with an enabler. So that's something.
It's, of course, pretty bad when they get to draw a whole bunch of cards off their Spirit Dancer first, but this is kind of what I meant when I said a lot of decks are kind of just relying on exactly Path to Exile as heroic answers, and you need more than that. But this deck has been really good for Shadowmaker. They've been playing it for a decent amount of time. The Stoic Sphinx in the top end of white aggro seems very strong.
Yeah, although I can never play Stoic Sphinx without a 1-off Splendor Mare now, because it's just so sweet to untap, give it lifelink without even casting a spell, because it's cycling. So
play Moonbringer Valkyrie. It's so wicked.
It's just beautiful. Anyway, I did have a Splendor Mare in the side as well, but I ended up deciding spot removal was better. So here's the Goblins 61 card special from Mod Tigrex. He played only 22 lands and didn't play any force, didn't play Krenko Mob Boss. Played a lot of really terrible ones. 3 Torch Courier, a Raging Goblin, 4 Reckless Lackey, and then...
There's 1 4. There's a twin shot sniper though.
Oh yeah,
Just
yeah.
get
But you
cast
can
with
cast
very
this.
much.
You can channel this for 2, so
It
it doesn't need to hit a
it-
4th land drop.
Yeah.
Um,
This is every time I see the Tigrak lists, I'm just completely shocked by these lists. Like seem a little underpowered and kind of samey, but I think Tigrak is now definitively the most top 8s in PD 500 history.
Could be. I think this list is interesting in that, you can make a pretty great board turned 1, 2, 3, and then just say, what do you got, fella? And then if you do get Wrath or
Yeah.
whatever, you've at least got War Boss to rebuild, or potentially a Haste Granter and a Pile Driver or something. And in Moira Marauder, it's just a nightmare. You have to deal with it, otherwise they're just going to play the cards off the Marauder and not from their hand, so that when you do finally deal with the situation, they still have a bunch of cards in hand. So I think, for a deck that just spams creatures 1, 2, 3, it's actually got some play against control and search. It's, missing Ringleader, missing Matron, no Goblin Lackey, which I think we've only had once. So it's not at its fullest power with the, literally Raging Goblin in the deck. But, here it is in the top 8. Beat essentially my deck. The Cleric, beat Clerics, beat Blue-White Control, beat another Azorius Tempo, beat Nice Lands, you got there, Nerd, which is Death Cloud. Saw that deck on camera a few times. Lost to me. This was my most one-sided match, I think. I just had a really good draw game 1 on the play, and then had the Wraths game 2, so not an issue. Beat Soldiers. Kind of surprised by that. I feel like Soldiers is kind of the same deck, but bigger, with a little more card draw, a little more play. But then lost to White Weenie, finally fell in the quarterfinal. And then just quickly, I guess we'll do the top 16. The highest placed Boros Glimpse in 9th. I played this deck and beat it, exactly like we drew it up.
No. This is all the non-top 8 are sorted by player name.
Really? Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So we have to
it's
go to standings. 9th place.
They are the 9th place, but
But it's just
the next
coincidence.
person is not.
So then,
Here, you can go back to the other page. I'll just tell you who the.
okay, that's a good idea.
It's 2K Light Chess.
So 2K Light Chess playing a pretty standard Boros Glimpse. Highest placing Glimpse. I think only 3 people played it.
A lot of people find it just not fun to play, between it being kind of annoying to click through triggers on Magic Online, and a lot of people viewing it as just not having a whole lot of play to it.
For sure.
Though it is certainly like all decks, has more play than you would expect, and is very powerful. I think it partially did this bad because everyone had a target on its back.
Yeah, I think it just was very good all season, and it's one of those decks that people tend to hate or despair about or worry about more than the average, which is to say, a deck that if you're not prepared for it, just kills you on turn 3 or 4. Just like the Oops decks of old, or maybe not quite that good, but yeah.
And unlike the Oops decks of old, unless you're in aggro deck that has Thalia, Boromir, Aethersworn Cannon, and Silence, or a control deck or other deck that can play counter magic, there isn't just a put Nile Spellbomb in your sideboard.
True, yeah. So you can't even kid yourself that you're ready. I actually gave up on Hardened Scales even though I was having great results, because I found putting 8 cards in the sideboard for it didn't swing the matchup enough.
It's a deck that simply a lot of decks just cannot beat it.
Yeah.
Though of course it's going to be awful against blue. It's going to be awful against white aggro. It's probably even maybe a little bad against red aggro, depending on if Burst Lightning is enough.
Mm-hmm.
We've
had a couple of its
obviously there's
seasons
a
being
lot
at
of
the.
aggro.
We've had a couple of seasons of being top of the meta. I think it's probably relief to most people that both the Discover cards, at least, don't seem to be getting any hits for season 34. So after 2 seasons of being one of the best decks, being consigned to the dustbin of history. Then we had the Death Cloud deck, which was kind of
Surprise.
yeah.
This
So
is-
it's not a Yorion deck, interestingly, but it is just a black-white control deck with 4 Death Cloud, playing Coalition Relic and Everflowing Chalice to kind of break the symmetry on Death Cloud, and then Planeswalkers, 9 Planeswalkers to not care about Death Cloud and have something to do while your opponent scrambles around with all their dead creatures and all their dead lands. Pretty cool. Haven't seen it before. Beats either Red Deck Wins or Boros Humans, beats Lurrus Humans deck, beat Control, beat another Control, lost to Goblins, lost to Shadowmaker Azorius Tempo, and beat Yorzov, unable to sneak into top 8 at 5-2. Who was 11th?
11th is 8-Bit Avenger.
8-Bit Avenger. I played against him. He
Boros
played
Humans.
Boros
I assume
Humans.
Almost exactly the same as the other list we saw, though
Yeah,
this one has
this is for main
price
deck
and
price,
progress.
but there's even a requisition
Yeah.
in the main, so it is, as you say, extremely similar. Losses
It's,
to
I believe
me
it might
and the mirror.
exactly just be Price of Progress in the main deck instead of Lightning Helixes.
Mhm.
I believe it might literally be exactly the same.
And who came 12th?
Rakura.
Rakura, who won a Panasia for 500 pretty recently, I feel like. Maybe even the last
Yep,
one.
did season 30 with Black Green Infect.
There we go.
Playing a. This is a really interesting red deck list. Literally, no one else is playing a list like this. This
Yeah.
has almost no creatures compared to others. Their only creatures are Abbot of Carol Keep, Bomat Courier, and Stromkirk Noble, and then Lavamancer, but that's almost just another burn spell.
Yeah, pretty wild, right? Bomat Courier and Abbott kind of replaced themselves, sort of, kind of, maybe. Lavamancer is more burn.
Burn spell.
What's that?
Sulfuric Vortex. Everything else is a burn spell. Sulfuric Vortex and Price of Progress are really helpful here because they make up the problem that a lot of our burn decks tend to have, where you point a bunch of burn at them and it does 12
Right.
damage.
And yeah, because a lot of our burn spells do 2. I mean, I see there's 4 shocks here, 4 bursts. You know, you have to aim an awful lot of shocks at your opponent to kill them. But I guess if you're also going to do 8 with a Price of Progress, the shock
Or a
becomes more
Sulfuric
useful.
Vortex.
Or a Sulfuric Vortex. So yeah, it's an interesting approach. They beat
Most red
the
deck
Aurus
lists
deck.
are playing-
Probably
Most
just
red deck lists were playing Kumano faces Kazan and 2 drops like Earthshaker Kenra.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Beat Boros Auras, lost to Boros Glimpse, beat Soldiers, beat Blue White Control. Blue White Control really only got the option of slamming a Dream Trawler on 6 and hoping it's good enough.
Yeah.
Lost to the Auras, so I guess that one can go either way. It depends if they have kind of well-timed removal for the enablers, I guess.
Also, I haven't played the matchup, but I would expect it's highly dependent on whether Auras draws Sentinel's Mark, which is the lifelink.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you just get in for 9 at some point, and suddenly the game is
Because-
over because they're
Yeah.
they're 3 cards down from that one swing.
If you have it honestly, like, the Auras deck has to play so hard around not getting their Spirit Dancer shocked that it ends up being kind of slow enough that if they don't have lifelink, they can just get raised.
Makes sense. Okay, and then after Rakura was
M-Dog.
what are we up to? 13th, 14th,
We are in 13th.
13th. So this is M-Dog Soldiers. Won a few tournaments, 4 or 5, I think, this season with this deck. Presumably
Yeah.
didn't change much. Still on 4 of all the legends, just not caring about the legend rule.
If we pretend that they're always going to be targeted by removal, then Legend Rule doesn't matter.
Yes, yeah. So 2 Boromir in the main, 2 more in the side for Glimpse, and Thalia helps a bit there too. 4 Thalia in the main.
Garrison Cat is really interesting.
Lost to Yorzov in round 2, but rallied against humans, whatever this is. Also humans, but with authority of the
Weird.
consoles.
Really weird white aggro.
Okay, crazy. And a worship, wow.
Like
That's something.
enchantment thing?
Beat red deck wins, beat control, and then playing for top 8 lost to Tigrettes Goblins. Again, slightly surprising to me, but I guess the nutty Goblins draws are pretty nutty. Can't.
If you don't draw a champion of the parish, then sometimes you just get gimmicked by
Yeah.
the Lord on 3. It's Sacritor.
Sacritor on 14th on their usual stuff, this kind of crazy Sarcomancy,
Weird.
but also it's kind of a control deck, but also it's got a Tarmogoyf in the form of Regal
The
Bunnycorn.
highest placing Yorion list.
Oh yeah. And
Kind of surprising.
pretty wild tournament. Started off with 2 losses to Boros Humans and then rallied into top 16. Is it Drake's? Nick's Devotion, Blue White Control, and Red Deck wins. Tenacious, 4 Tenacious Underdog. This deck confuses me because I don't know if it's aggro or control, but I guess it just depends what you're playing against.
Mid-range.
Right, yeah. But is Sarcomancy a mid-range card? It is if you can blink it or pick it up with Pixie, I guess, is the answer.
Yeah, if this deck has, it's actually very good if you go Sarcomancy, Pixie, Sarcomancy, you get 6 power, some of it's flying, Bunnycorn does
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. And if you ever get a Yorion off for like 2 or 3 bits of value, then hoo boy, that's
wait.
lovely.
There's dams in this, right?
There is not.
No, there's not
There
dams.
are no dams
Stop
in the
it.
75. We are Oath of Kiting and Tithing Blading our way to victory. And we have Spear of Annihilation in the sideboard. I do not know what this card does.
It's a lot of words.
It's a kind of a void. You play it for X counters.
It's
Exile.
like an engineered explosive.
Okay, yeah. So it's like a bad, a bit less efficient EE or something like that. But it is a Wrath of sorts, and it also gets Planeswalkers. Is that right? Creatures and Planeswalkers. Okay, weird Wrath that can be picked up later. No, it exiles itself. Okay, well that one bears further study. Okay, they have all their sideboarding notes here, so if you want to play this deck for the last 4 or 5 days of the
4
season.
days?
No notes I noticed for Clerics or Boros Auras, so this sideboard guide already out of date. But pretty good. Secretor's been jamming this one for a while. Very good player.
Partially part of that is that Sacritor took a break for a decent amount of time in between. They played a lot early mid-season. I think they took a bit of a break. So they weren't. Yeah, their last play was in June before this 500.
Got it. So who's 15th, if I'm remembering where we are?
That would be Watch.
Okay, so Watch, Free Ponder, Blue is underpowered, playing Blue-White Control, with which they have won many.
True Pre-Ponder.
Started out with 2 losses to Glimpse and Rakdos Aristocrats, then 1 out to top 16, playing a deck involving Banishing Stroke and Void Mage Prodigy and Mistcaller.
Miracles.
Oh,
I
and
suppose.
this is the deck with the Eldrazi Displacer. There's actually only 1 in the sideboard. I thought it was going to be combo with this Mistcaller. This is Lurrus in the side, 3 Lurrus in the side. Okay, yeah. This bears further study for sure. Crazy deck.
Restore
It
balance.
lost quite a lot though, beat Aristocrats, and this one beat the Donate Falcon
Blue-white
deck.
Control
Beat
combo.
Azorius Control in the win and into top 16.
Half of Watch's wins were in the mirror.
Makes sense. And then
Arguably 3 of them, if you count the other deck as control.
Dream Trawler is the main win condition. Wraths and draw and counterspells and spot removal. 26 lands, including 1 Colonnade, 1 Castle Vantress. 4 of them cycle though. And then 3 Approach to the Second Sun for yours off and other non-counterspell decks that don't beat you down. Hero's Intervention for artifacts and enchantments, maybe gain some life. More spot removal, more forbids for combo, I guess. Another Dream Trawler, another Wrath. So just more of the same, really. Had success with this all season. Probably sad to lose to Glimpse in round 2. I think that's generally considered favourable-ish. You know, a bit of spot removal, bit of counter spells, and then plenty of draw and wraths for any kind of follow-up hardcaster Chancellor type nonsense. Okay, and then 16th? Are we up to 16th now?
I believe we're on 15th.
Oh, 15th?
No, we're on 16th.
16th.
You're right. It's Gundalock.
So this was actually the player that played in the last round against Watch Wonder, so I guess they maybe had a win and into top 8, but probably not. But with the loss...
On Blue Azorius control.
Yeah, so this is another blue-white control. It looks like pretty much the same build.
It's like one Muyon Ling
Yeah,
different,
there's a
I think.
Muyon. Yeah, and this, I mean, and 3 approaching the side, yeah, similar, maybe even the same
Very-
sideboard.
Definitely started with the same list.
A deck that we've become extremely accustomed to. Presumably, most of this survives into next season, so...
We're losing No More Lies, I think.
Right,
without
no more lies
the-
going, and probably like the energy counter spell is the best replacement.
I don't think we're going to get the energy counterspell.
Oh, so maybe just some terrible quench is the next best counter spell.
It's going to be very similar if we end up with either lapse or leak, but without those, I
don't-
kind of question what's going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's very interesting. Out of it is great in the right meta, but if it needs to counter
one's
non-creature
leaking
spells, it's
too.
pretty bad. Oh, is it? Okay. Well, then...
I think maybe.
Then presumably Wrath of God and Dream Trawler is still a deck of some kind, but the exact build is going to take some work.
It is 80% this week, but it is at 3 cents right now.
Okay, so I would call that unlikely, but definitely possible.
Plausible.
Okay, so it's a pretty sweet top 16. Some repeats in like human-based Champion of the Parish aggro and control. But yeah, generally pretty diverse, and I think this was a pretty great season.
What happened to Greasefang? I was
Greasefang-
told the deck was broken.
Greasefang did not make the top 16. Anyway, alright, I'm going to stop there as we're now 9 hours, 17 minutes into this tournament, effectively. But maybe I'll play the APAC in 4 hours' time. Cheers.